Welcome to the Neuro Air Podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Welcome back to the Neuro Air Podcast. We are continuing our 4N sequence. So if you've been following along, just a little refresher, episode 18, we took a deeper dive into the window of tolerance. So if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend going back. Episode 19, we went more into notice. Episode 20 was name. This is episode 21 into nurture. And I love nurture because without nurture, it kind of leaves notice and name just like hanging out there. And sometimes we might actually feel worse because we've noticed, we've named, but this is the now what. Especially if you've been starting to notice your patterns, you're naming your survival responses, you're starting to identify that you spend more time in fight, flight, freeze, or appeasement. But if you don't know what to do next, awareness can sometimes feel heavy. So today is about the importance of what comes next. If notice is seeing and naming is understanding, then nurture is responding. For many of us, nurture wasn't modeled for us growing up. And again, this does not mean that you had a terrible childhood. This does not mean that your parents failed you. And this does not mean that there was abuse. This could just mean that you had a very busy mom or busy parents, and they couldn't be there for every single moment that you needed them. And remember that nurture can especially show up in response to a lot of small things we experienced growing up. Small things that we couldn't integrate. Moments where something felt overwhelming, confusing, rejecting, scary, or super lonely, and there just wasn't enough support in that moment to metabolize it. Does that make sense? My friend and colleague Quinn defines trauma as anything with a high level of impact on the nervous system and a low level of processing and understanding. I really love this definition because it shifts the conversation away from the size of events. Sometimes in therapy language, we say this was a big T event or little t event, trying to say the amount of trauma that someone experienced. And that is not what this conversation is about. It is about, did your nervous system get to complete the experience, or did it get stored, no matter how big or how small? Remember, what we couldn't integrate does not disappear. Over time, it can influence our sense of presence, our sense of control, our range of emotions, our thought patterns, and our behaviors. And often we don't even realize it's connected. For many of us growing up, it wasn't just one catastrophic moment. It was a lot of small moments, again, that our brain and body could not integrate. Moments that had a high level of impact on the nervous system and a low level of processing. And those moments can kind of stack on top of each other. And I want to take a minute, just kind of share a little bit more about my journey. I think I've mentioned this on some of the previous episodes, but when I was 15, my relationship with food shifted drastically and I started binge eating a lot. And I did not talk about it for many, many years. I think that pattern lasted over 20 years. I was talking to David about this the other night. We were driving home from a date, and I just started breaking down in his car. And I just said, I wish I would have known for that period of time that nothing was wrong with me. Because when I would binge, it didn't mean I failed, but I didn't know it then. And that's what I believed. I believed that my patterns equaled the state of my worth, and that meant failure or that I wasn't good enough. For so long, I spent so much time of my life feeling like I was broken. No matter what I tried, nothing worked long-term with my relationship with food. I could notice something was off. I knew my patterns weren't sustainable, but I didn't know how to name them in a way that didn't equal failure. In my mind, unhealthy patterns with food meant that I lacked discipline. It meant I wasn't strong enough, and it meant I couldn't get it together. And nurture, I did not know how to do that. After a binge, I always felt awful. I felt physically sick, so emotionally ashamed. And instead of asking, what is my nervous system trying to regulate? The question always came back to some version of what is wrong with me? And it wasn't until college that I started to learn the equation that the more I ate, the more I needed to exercise. And I can see now, food isn't bad. All the foods that I would binge on, none of them are quote unquote bad. And the forms of exercise that I engaged in excessive amounts, it's not that the exercises were bad. It was the amount. And running isn't bad. Triathlons aren't bad. I loved all of those things. But for me, I use things like this to bypass trying to regulate and trying to deepen and work with my body to try to understand what was actually going on. Running became ignoring what I was noticing in my body. If I was going into hypoarousal and starting to shut down, I would do intense cardio until I would get to the point of exhaustion. And if my body said it wanted to rest, I overrode it. I learned to outrun my nervous system, literally run. And I think now I can look back and say safely, I was really just trying to run from my own life. Maybe on the outside, it looked healthy. And in college, I would get comments how great I looked and how awesome it was that I was self-disciplined to run. And so that feedback also felt super confusing because internally, I was dealing with an intense form of dysregulation and an extreme level of survival. I needed the 4 ends long before I even knew what they were. Again, I talked about I could notice something was off, but I didn't know how to name it in a way that meant I wasn't broken. And if I had known how to say, you're not failing, your body is trying to cope, I really feel like if I had the language back then, which none of us did, that could have helped change so much for me. Now, when I look back on my 15-year-old self, because through visualization and a lot of work, I've spent a lot of time with her, this version of me. I can now see that she wasn't someone who lacked discipline. She was exuding a cry for help and didn't know how to ask for it. She was dealing with such intense nervous system dysregulation and trying to find a way to regulate. She just didn't do it in the ways that were actually helpful. And remember, sometimes these patterns don't show up just in isolation. They can be layered. Sometimes they're inherited stress patterns around control, scarcity, body image, and performance that you saw and felt in your own family. And when we zoom out even further, we can begin to realize something else. Because the moment we say maybe something didn't get integrated, people often think, are you saying something was wrong with my parents? Please, again, hear me when I say not integrating something does not mean that somebody failed you. It means your nervous system experienced something that felt overwhelming or confusing or lonely, and there wasn't enough support in that actual moment to fully process it. And sometimes that's not because someone was harmful or neglectful. Sometimes it's because they were overwhelmed too. Or again, you had busy parents trying to do what they needed to pay the bills, to put food on the table, to offer you this amazing life. And sometimes it's because that's how it was modeled to them too. So maybe you had a parent that was overwhelmed, but again, that doesn't mean that they didn't love you. Does that make sense? So this conversation doesn't have to be about blame. This is about understanding how nervous systems develop inside other nervous systems. And when we understand that, nurture becomes less about an accusation, which I hope you guys see. That is not how I think about it or am going into that. I believe nurture becomes more about compassion. Does that make sense? Again, these moments that had this high level of impact on our nervous system. So something that's pretty fascinating when we think about is that in developmental biology, we can see a little bit more about possibly what we're experiencing now based on what was going on with our family. When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, okay, you guys with me? When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother's eggs were already forming inside her body. which means if you're biologically female, the egg that became you was present in immature form inside your mother's body while she was inside your grandmother's womb. 3 generations in one body. Let's just pause there for a second. Do you get that? 3 generations sharing one environment. Now, I want to make sure you hear me. This does not mean that trauma is automatically passed down. This does not mean that you are doomed by your lineage, but we do know that stress hormones do affect development. We know that stress can influence gene expression, what scientists call epigenetic changes. And those changes, they don't alter your DNA sequence, but they influence how your genes are expressed. In other words, how loud or quiet certain stress responsive systems are. Does that make sense? So certain systems show up louder or quieter in the body based on how the genes express. And we also have research, particularly from animal studies and growing evidence in humans, showing that stress experienced by fathers can influence sperm through epigenetic changes as well, which means stress exposure even before conception can influence stress sensitivity in offspring. Crazy, but powerful and super important to ponder on in your own life. So when you look at your anxiety or your reactivity or your shutdown and you think, why am I like this? Remember, it might not just be your story. It might be layered with another story or stories in your family system. And here's the empowering part. If stress can influence gene expression, so can safety, so can regulation, so can nurture. Epigenetics is not a one-way street. Your nervous system is not fixed. The same biology systems that adapt to stress can learn to adapt to safety. So when you offer nurture now, remember, you're not just calming yourself in the moment. You may be shifting patterns that have been carried for generations. Not because you have this immense responsibility to rewrite your family's history, but because you can change how your body carries it. I say that because I've watched it happen with me and so many others. I've watched what shifts when someone finally gives their nervous system what it didn't receive at the moment of impact. Over years of working with so many clients, I started noticing something really powerful. Even though the situations were wildly different families, different events, different situations, different ages. But when I guided someone back to a younger moment where something felt stuck, the unmet needs were almost identical. That younger part of the client almost always needed a few basic things. The first one is to feel safe. Safety is that most important thing. Another really powerful thing and theme I started to see with my clients is to feel love unconditionally. That younger version of them needed to feel that love. And a third one is that they needed to feel that they were not alone in the moment. And another one is to see that something else could have been possible in that moment. And with all of this, I'm talking about allowing the nervous system to finish what it couldn't back then. Remember Sarah from the last few episodes? Again, she's just a composite of so many clients. So I'm kind of using her in this made up version of years of experiences and client stories, but nothing, again, shared with specific details. Sarah has done so much work on her anxiety. She's now learning to notice, and she can also name things. But she described something to me super interesting, this shaking at her core. She described it like a flutter, like something underneath everything, like a program running in the background. And no matter what she does, it's always there. So when I asked her to gently settle on the sensation at her core and let her mind drift back to the first time she remembered feeling it, she landed on the playground in second grade. And immediately she said, "This is stupid. This wasn't a big thing at all. It can't be this. There's no way that my anxiety is connected to this thing on the playground." Remember, this is really important because we often invalidate the very moments that shaped our nervous system. So anyways, Sarah described being on the playground. She went up and tried to join a group of girls to play. And she just said she remembered them looking at her meanly and said, "You're not in our club anymore." And they ran away laughing. That was the moment. Sarah sat there with me for quite a while, very still, very quiet. And then she said, there's no way this is the source of my current anxiety that I've carried all these years. And I asked her just to gently stay with it. Through guided visualization, she brought her adult self into the scene, which means she visualized herself now, this adult part, on the playground with her second grade self. She knelt down next to her younger self and she told her how loved she was. There's that unconditional love. And she says, I'm here to help you, even though I wasn't then. In this visualization, she also brought in a friend, one she created in her mind, and she let that friend take her second grade self by the hand, and she watched them go off and skip and play hopscotch. And Sarah just started to sob. And then she said, why don't I feel that shaking right now in my body? And I asked her, what if that sensation has been there trying to just get your attention all along? What if she just needed you to notice her, to name her, and to nurture her? Remember, we did not change what happened to Sarah in second grade, but she was able to start to shift how her nervous system has carried it for so long. The brain does not fully distinguish between vividly imagined and real experiences. When we bring safety into a previously unsafe memory, while the nervous system is in a more regulated state, we can allow for new neural pathways to form. We are not erasing the past, guys, but we are updating the coding. I often describe the nervous system like an old metal filing cabinet. Every experience we have had of our entire lives is a separate file. Everything processed is flat and in order with its own unique label. But the unprocessed files stick up higher than the rest. And when you try to close the drawer, it won't shut because these files that are unprocessed are sticking up. So as you try to close the drawer, they're hitting against the filing cabinet. Does that make sense? Nurture is how we gently work with the files that are sticking up. And sometimes the coolest thing I've seen is that when we integrate one file, several others can often go along with it. It's one of the most powerful things to witness in this work. And remember, I'm not asking you to do deep trauma processing alone, but as you notice and name, you can begin offering nurture in small ways. You can talk to yourself differently. You can use curiosity with yourself instead of shame. You can now start to offer unconditional love to what you're discovering. And I want to pause here and speak directly to those of you who are struggling with addiction. Food, alcohol, exercise, work, control, substances, scrolling, maybe even achievement. Please hear me. Addiction is often a nervous system trying to regulate without enough tools. It is not any sort of proof that means you are broken. It is often proof that your system has been trying desperately to survive. And if this episode has found you just right now, I do not believe that's by accident. You may not have known how to notice safety. You may not have had language to name without shame. And you may never have been shown how to nurture instead of punish yourself. But I am here to tell you that you can learn. And the fact that you are here listening tells me something is in you, ready right now, ready for your own gentleness with yourself, ready for your own acts of integration, and ready for something different in your life. Remember, I'm not asking you to overhaul your whole life at once. Your nervous system will not let you do that, and that is not sustainable. I am asking you to start small. Here are some statements you might try offering yourself. I see you now, and I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. You made sense then, and you make sense now. What you felt and are feeling, it was real then, and it is real now. You are doing the best you can. You do not have to carry this alone anymore. I am here now. I am the safe adult that you didn't have then. You don't have to prove anything to be loved. You are worthy of love in this moment as you are. It's safe to rest and it's safe to soften. You can release this when you're ready. I've got you. And a beautiful one, even if no one protected you then, I will protect you. You can come back to these at any time. You'll also find them in the show notes if you want to copy them and save them to your phone. Just practice saying them. Your nervous system is always listening. As you move through your week, I want you to sit with these few questions. And again, down below for you to find later. Number 1, what have I been calling a failure that might actually be a survival strategy? Where am I responding to myself with punishment instead of nurture? Number 3, if nothing is wrong with me, what becomes possible now? Number 4, what would even 5% more compassion look like in one moment with myself this week? And number 5, what does the part of me that feels the most shame actually need right now? Remember, all you need to explore these questions is curiosity. Just a little summary. Remember that notice helps you see. Name helps you understand. Nurture changes how it lives in you. And this isn't about not pretending that something didn't happen, but you are helping your brain integrate what it couldn't integrate at the time. You can allow your nervous system to complete what it had to freeze, what it had to fight, what it had to run away from or suppress. Through visualization, through this internal act of nurture and nervous system work, you can update your brain's coding. You can soften the charge within you. You can take the file that's been sticking up in that old metal filing cabinet and gently press it back into place, not by forcing it, but by integrating it. And when a file integrates, it no longer becomes a stuck point. It no longer runs in the background like a hidden program. It becomes part of your story without hijacking your present state. That is integration. And when you do that, you don't just feel better, you can also change your lineage. Because the way your nervous system carries the past influences how you show up now. And when you show up differently, the patterns can shift. Small shifts, real shifts, lasting shifts. You change how stress moves forward. You change how your children or the people around you experience you. You change how you experience yourself. And here's your gentle challenge. This week, choose one moment, just one, where you would normally criticize yourself and instead pause. Please pause. Place a hand somewhere on your body and say something kind. That's it. That's how we start with nurture. Small, consistent, yet powerful. Next week, we move into navigate because once you can notice, name, and nurture, you don't just heal, you lead. And that, my friends, is becoming a Neuro Air. Until next time, bye guys.